The Insanity of Lucy Pevensie, Part 1, Chapter 1. Blurred lights and flickering from the ceiling were what caused Lucy Pevensie to wake up. She felt a bit dazed, confusion clouding her mind. Amidst her moments of night terrors and cold sweats, she remembered a boy's face. The thought of it made her feel as though she were melting inside, her mind wobbly like a bouncy ball hitting the wall in a creepy hotel. Near a silhouette whispering the name Jack. Souls gone, clattering windows frozen shut, covered in at least 20 inches of snow. These were just some of the weird, labor dreams she had when she closed her eyes at night. She started to come back for a moment, and then she felt a weird shiver down her arms. She felt, what? Disgusted. Disappointment flooded her reasoning. Why do I cry for the care of someone who never loved me? Why do I feel them hold me as if I'm standing next to a blank canvas being drawn, while this mysterious silhouette stands in the corner of the room? I can feel his eyes from the back of my head. It's a weird sensation, as if someone is staring into the inner workings of my black heart, my dead soul. Lucy speaks. Why do I hate myself? I wake up every day in this same exact moment, going through the day with this same exact feeling, but then, that wardrobe recenters itself in her mind. She's drawn away from her pain for a moment's notice and remembers that wardrobe. Where is it? What is it? Does it even exist? Why does it show itself to me from the distance? It's like I've seen this place, spent time with it before, but never have I felt so consumed in the insanity of the idea. What is that wardrobe? Then she gets out of bed and clumsily throws her underpants on and moves into the bathroom. Does she continue to brush her teeth every day? Why? Because they smell good. Does it matter anyway? They're just rotting away. What difference does it make? But the thought never stops crossing her mind, so she just ignores it. She ended up showering and getting ready for her day. She lives in a small house about a mile from a town where she goes to school. Her 2 brothers and sister died back in the war while trying to escape. Only her mother and father made it out with her. I'd tell you their names, but she prefers they never get spoken around her. It causes her to lose the feeling in her left arm, a dull burning in her chest above her heart, at times below her ribcage. This is a symptom of the post-traumatic stress she attained after her parents held her in their arms, hiding under the house in a little 6-person bunker her father had built for these kinds of situations. The worst part of that is that only the 3 of them made it into the bunker, while the other 3 siblings were violently injured at first, then delimbed one by one in front of the sister, while the violent war general held her down on the rug in front of the couch. He was ruthless, gripping her head and sexually assaulting her in as many ways as he deemed necessary. The whole time, the parents held Lucy while all 3 sobbed and watched through a glimpse of the little window they were behind. After they finished hacking the 2 boys apart, they took the sister while she was completely naked and crushed each one of her legs, then smashed her head in with a little hatchet the general pulled from his side. The day dawns beautifully, with pure sunlight and a glow of refreshing air. It smells like laundry as she walks down the street, heading home from school on this late evening. Her mind has been set on the idea of that wardrobe all day. Now she wants to know why it keeps presenting itself to her. Maybe it's a spirit of some kind trying to talk to her. Or maybe it's a shapeshifter, she says lightly under her breath while walking past one of the people's houses, a block from the dirt road that starts to lead to her home. Lucy thinks to herself, it's best I keep these things to myself. Mama told me nobody will like me if I go around being all weird and separated mentally from all of them. She stops about half a mile from the dirt road, and sees a weird-looking creature from her peripheral vision. It's like a tiny little man with long hair, almost as if it was an Oompa Loompa from one of her favorite books, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's sprinting, she says with a light gasp. She peers over now and it scurries behind a small bush. She stops in awe, and then a black crow flies off from behind the bush into the forest. What could that have been? Lucy says out loud. She knows nobody is around her, except maybe the phantoms that watch her through her windows at night. She looks at the sky. A distinct purplish light blooms through the trees and looks so gorgeous. She almost wants to start crying for some odd reason. Lucy finishes her walk back to the house and sees her mum, standing on the porch calling her. Lucy, oh Lucy, my darling, why don't you come wash up? It's almost time for dinner, honey. Lucy lightly nods and says, yes, Mum, I will do that. Everyone sits at the table, the father reading his daily newspaper, while reminiscing about his time as a fisherman when they lived in Germany. The mother starts to talk to Lucy. Darling, I had the weirdest conversation today with a tall man. He looked kind of like a man you'd see in an old medieval painting. Or, better yet, something like Gandalf from that Lord of the Rings book you loved to read as a little girl. Lucy asks, what was his name, Mum? The mother gets a blank expression and says, you know, that's an oddly good question. Now that I think about it, he never gave me a name. All he said to me was, watch your step, miss. If you go into that wardrobe, you may never return. Suddenly, Lucy flails herself from the chair and lets out a shockingly small shriek that even caused the father to lay the newspaper down and look at her startled alongside the mother. Lucy says, what wardrobe are you talking about? The mother blankly responds, I was just clothing shopping at the store, honey. I was going into the same wardrobe I always go into to look at the new winter coats for your father. Why are you so intrigued? Is something wrong, honey? Lucy calms her nerves, and realizes that other wardrobes do exist aside from the one she keeps seeing in her dreams. Plus, she remembers that wardrobe because her mum would take her to the store as a little girl after the war to shop for dresses, and she would always see that wardrobe. Nothing ever came out of it though. It was just a plain old piece of wood with doors. No magic to be seen there. She sits down and apologizes to her mother. After they finished dinner, Lucy went to her room to read and go to bed. She was currently invested in a book called The Godfather. As she kept trying to read, she kept blanking her mind, wondering, why would that man tell mother that she may never return in that wardrobe? What a weird thing to say to someone randomly while they were shopping for clothing. Maybe this man knows of the wardrobe I keep seeing in my dreams. Maybe he's the key to this insanity. She lays her head on the pillow and blows out the candle. After 10 minutes, she's sound asleep. The next day, Lucy wakes to a light movement coming from outside the house. It's the sound of 2 horses and a man being pulled behind them on a small carriage. Lucy blankly opens her eyes to the sound and leans over towards the window. She looks straight at the man stepping out of the carriage. It's the same man Mother described at the dinner table last night. Howard, she thinks. Why is this man at our home? How does this man know where we live? Did Mother tell him at the store? Why would he be here? Then Lucy's mum calls her name from the living room. Lucy? Lucy, come to the living room, honey. There is a man here that wishes to speak with you. Lucy feels dazed yet confused. Is this another vivid dream? Why did this man come to the house? How did this man know who Lucy is? She goes to get up from the bed, but when she does, she starts to see blurry, and all of a sudden, the man is standing over her bed. He blows a weird little powder straight into her face. The walls start to peel away as if this reality is somehow connected to that weird theory about a town she read about once called Silent Hill. The walls peel to the point where the whole room looks like a blurry, colorless canvas you'd watch someone paint a naked body on. Then the man disappears when she goes to scream. From the corner of the room, out of a weird, pitch-black darkness, a silhouette steps into the light. It growls at Lucy. She starts trying to head towards the door, crying, but it keeps coming closer as she slowly crawls off the bed. Her movements are stunned. She can't move very fast. The creature snarls and screams, Lucy, we will eat your flesh. We will peel your skin as if you were the very wall you just watched peel in front of your eyes. She screams at it. Leave me alone, please. Someone help me, please. The creature starts to chant a weird language Lucy can't decipher. Then she's able to stand up off the bed. She's able to move now. As she sprints for the door while looking back, the creature starts getting further and further from her vision. But the door isn't getting any closer. She goes for it still though. Finally, after reality hits that she's got to be inside of a nightmare, she screams a phrase her mum would slap her mouth for. What the fuck is going on here? What are all of you mysterious creatures? Please leave me alone. I never harmed. Right before she could say any more, after harmed, she falls through the floor. Now she's falling through a weird area that looks like a tube with stars inside of it. All of a sudden, she opens her eyes and wakes up screaming while her mum and father are standing next to her, holding her down with a doctor in her bed. She's terrified. What's going on? Where the hell am I? Why is this happening? The two parents and the doctor's faces start to seep away and melt from the bone, the flesh bleeding and oozing pus. They all three look at her and scream. The wardrobe. Lucy, stay away from the wardrobe. She wakes up, this time in the real world, if you called it that, and sees her mum peeking through the door. Honey, mother says. Are you okay, Lucy? I heard you crying. What's going on? I came to check on you. Lucy starts sobbing her eyes out. Her mother comes into the room and tries to comfort her, but Lucy looks her mum in the eyes and sobs lightly, saying gently, Mum, is any of this even real? The mother, surprised, says, Yes, honey. Why wouldn't it be? Lucy says, I need help. Mum, there's something wrong with me. I keep seeing things I don't understand. What's happening to me? Why do I keep seeing weird things? The mother doesn't respond right away. Instead, she looks at Lucy and says, You've always been a gifted little girl. Brilliant lady of your kind, but always remember one thing. You're in control of your own mind. Don't let it take you over. That's how people become weak and then get possessed and bad things happen. Well, anyway, forget about all of this. You just had a nightmare. Lucy, get some rest and start a fresh day tomorrow. The mother kisses her on the head, then proceeds to get up and walk out of her room, closing the door behind her. Lucy awakes from her restless sleep, because of the terrors she faced in her mind, the very night before. She's dripping sweat. She feels excluded from her own idea of reality at this point. It goes on throughout her day when she has breakfast, goes to school, eats her lunch, and eventually returns home from school. She's had this fizzled feeling of distortion all day long. It's been something she's tried brushing off, but it always comes back. What's real and what's not? She whispers to herself. This can't keep happening every night. Sometime back in the 1800s, there was this man. His name was Aslan. He always envisioned a passion since childhood formed around the idea that he could turn into a lion. It gave him great pleasure reading about fictional places that had talking animals, talking plants, trees whispered and watched people in the kingdoms. Whoever was in reign of that land was given the knowledge of the trees, because the trees would pay attention to everything going on around them at all times. They were always filled with tons of information at a great price, of course. You're probably wondering what the price was, because trees don't have rules or need currency. These trees, in particular, were said to be evil demonic entities, but nobody truly knew what they were. The currency the trees required were newborn babies. When provided one, the tree would open a weird hole from its bark, and the child would never be seen again. The creepiest part of it was that in these forests where people played with these forbidden idols that offered knowledge at a price, you could randomly hear the cries and screams of a child being tortured. At least that's what all the old folks of the towns described it as. Remember, this isn't real. These were just in the books Aslan found himself reading when he wasn't at work as the magician who could see time bend. That was his slogan. He was so irrationally obsessed with himself that he thought he was capable of things others only dreamed of. Where it starts to get disturbing is the fact that Aslan kidnapped a woman's child and sacrificed it to a Baphomet, who always prayed to a weird blood statue that would change appearances like a shapeshifter. This statue only had two appearances, one being an owl and the other being a bull or lion-headed humanoid idol. This statue was used by the ancient Egyptians and continued on over the years. Anyone who fed it a small newborn child would get a wish granted. Anything they could imagine. Child sacrifice was the biggest currency of the trees Aslan read about. So he thought, well, If this Baphomet isn't pulling my leg with this potent black magic, maybe there's a possibility this deity named Moloch will grant me. The unexplained events in society's news coverage is that after they found the ritual grounds through an extensive 6-month search party, the baby was never found again, and Aslan was never seen again either. He's still missing to this current day that Lucy Pevensie is now generationally part of. There's a ton of wives' tales and fairy tales that the kids and elders have come up with, the most recurring one being that Aslan's sacrifice caused him his life in this world. People believe he disappeared that night because he begged to be turned into a lion, but in doing so, he was banished to another dimension, realm, or distorted reality, whatever you want to call the idea. Either way, the point is that this man has never been seen again, and this happened over thousands of years ago, so now they just write about it in the history books that Lucy has to study in school. There's a man who lived in a small village 100 miles from Lucy's home. He's said to have knowledge of the disappearance of Aslan, but every time anyone had tried to talk to him, he would end up chanting weird languages and bleeding out of his eyes and teeth. This man has to have 24/7 supervision now. He can't be left alone because they used to find him levitating in the middle of the woods, chanting weird languages. Other times he'd be trying to harm himself, screaming the same phrase over and over again, Armenian O tilde O O O tilde O tilde. Once this phrase was broken down by some professionals, they figured out it was a Turkish saying that meant Aslan. They had a priest try to bless this man because everyone was terrified he needed an exorcism. After they figured out what the phrase meant, the old man wouldn't ever leave his chair in the corner of his living room for months. He just sat there, never ate, wouldn't drink water. He just stared out at the forest, looking at the trees while the wind blew lightly on the leaves and snow during the winter. He would bleed out of his eyes and mouth constantly, just whispering that same chant over and over again for hours on end, while his priest would come to try blessing the place and his helper would watch him and try offering him things. But this man never moved, not even the slightest finger movement. It's insane to this day that he never died. He lost so much body fat from malnutrition that he started looking like a skeleton. So eventually, in the favor of this man's family, they had him placed in the custody of a psych ward. To this day, he's still alive. They have him hooked up on multiple IVs, feeding him, hydrating him, and giving him medications that keep him in a coma. Lucy has been thinking about a bunch of weird things lately, but on this cold wintry night, it has been worse than usual. She's been reading her books, but she keeps thinking about that man Aslan that all the kids talk and make jokes about at school. She stares out her window looking into her forest of trees every night. On this cold snowy night, something seems much different this time. She sees a black shadow standing really far in the woods from her window. It has glowing red eyes. She thinks to herself, who could be out there? It's too cold for a hunter. Plus the snow is at least 6 inches deep right now. It's been coming down for the past week solid every day. Her walks to school have been miserable because of it. She just tries to brush this shadow off and continue reading her book. After about a half an hour of getting back into her book, the candle on her desk goes out and she hears a small tap on the window. She looks up out the window and sees the figure closer, standing near another tree near the house. Except this time, it's presenting itself more clearly. Now, while it's super quiet, she hears a whisper in her left ear. Lucy, come to me, child. I will show you the way. Trust me, Lucy. I can offer you great things. She jumps from her chair and closes her eyes, but instead of seeing darkness, she sees the old man Mum told her about at dinner that one night. Those horrible dreams come back to her when he blew powder into her face. She goes to let out a shriek, but he comes up and whispers, Naldvat, Jeg, Mum, Las, Les, which means in English, follow me into the forest. For some odd reason, the front of Lucia's forehead starts to heat up really hot. She thinks she's going to pass out, but instead, a light eye opens that she can see out of for a moment. She sees the words she just heard this weird man speak decipher into English. She runs to the bathroom and looks in the mirror at her forehead. She continues to see out of this third eye for a moment with this phrase of another language in clear English continuing to say, "Follow me into the forest." She keeps looking at her forehead and feeling it. But there is nothing there. It's just super warm. And then the eye closes all of a sudden. She was standing in the bathroom with the door closed, and suddenly the door opens lightly, and a little child cries. This startles Lucy, so of course she jumps, but then she sees a figure sprint toward the front door in the house. She walks out of the bathroom and sees the front door wide open, snow lightly falling on the front doorstep. She grabs her coat from the rack and sees the fireplace still going. Both of her parents are fast asleep in their room with the door closed. You can hear the father snoring from his long day at work. Lucy heads outside and sees the figure in the woods still, but now it's moving further into the trees, so she starts to head out into the snow. She gets further and further, and finally gets surrounded by the massive trees. All she hears is snow falling and creaking sounds. She continues to go further and further until she finds a man sitting on a log, except this isn't a silhouette, figure, or anything weird looking. It's just a man with hunting gear on. He looks up at Lucy and says, "Thankfully, you came. I'm sorry for showing you such disturbing images in your dreams. I didn't know how else to reach you. There is so much I want to explain to you without scaring you off, but I have such little time." Lucy lightly asks, "Sir, who is that old man with the beard? And why did he blow powder in my face?" The man looks at her and says, "He's a shapeshifter. He has been sent to distort your reality because of your mind. Lucy, you are an exceptionally brilliant little girl. When you do things that seem weird to others, or you see these things others can't see, it's because you have more power than you are supposed to. I can't explain much to you because nothing makes any sense, but the only reason we are talking right now is because I've been battling the shapeshifter by using white magic to try and get in touch with you. Your sister wants you to know something." Lucy, startled by the man's words, Lucy says, "What? How do you know my sister? She died years ago with my 2 brothers. How is she trying to speak to me?" The man says, "As I said, I can't explain much. I don't have much time left. Lucy, listen to my words clearly. You must find the man in the psych ward and speak with him. He can help you. You must stay strong, Lucy. Keep an open mind and never believe anything anyone tells you. You will never see me again after this night. The demons are too powerful. Lucy, I made a sacrifice to speak these words to you for your sister as well. She's worried. They are trying to find you, Lucy." Lucy tries to ask the man another question, but before she can, she hears a branch snap behind her and a cry from a small child. She flips around and sees nothing except snow falling on the ground through the trees. She turns back around towards the man to ask him another question, but when she does, nobody is there on the log anymore, as if the man just vanished. The forest is a still calming sight now and super white from the snow. She looks around but does not see anything, just trees and snow. She starts heading back to the house in complete silence. She heads back in and sees the fireplace still going, so she goes to her room and grabs all of her blankets and pillows. She proceeds to make a comfy bed on the rug in front of the fireplace, and lays down in it, all snuggled up in the blankets and warm now. She watches the fireplace crackle and starts to cry lightly before closing her eyes. Chapter 2. On windy, icy days, the asphalt underneath can't breathe, almost as if the earth is covering its true form. The mighty pain of the sun beating on the ice causes black holes in the world of imagination. The stars are always shining in the sky at night. Every time Lucy looks at them begging and pleading, the only thing that matters to her is manifestation. Stars of alignment cause focus, and with sheer determination, she must find that wardrobe. Where is it? What is it? Why is it real or is it fake? Is she just making all of this up? She thinks these thoughts to herself constantly. The idea of fairy tales in a dimension called Narnia, a weird hell filled with demonic creatures and evil spirits, consumes Lucy's mind. She says to herself, "I've got to tell Mother. She has to take me to that old man. I must speak to him. He must help me. I want to know more. Maybe I can find my sister. That man in the forest told me she wanted me to heed the warning. How did he speak to her? Where is she? Lucy ponders this thought because her sister is dead. It's all so mysterious. What is happening? A few weeks have passed, and Lucy still continues to contemplate how she's going to reach this man. Mother had an outcry, and threatened to have her placed with a shrink, if she kept bringing up these delusions. There's a man who has been talked about for centuries in the history books, just like Aslan, except this man wasn't known for any evil. They call him Sinsana. It's said nobody has ever seen this man's real face. It's been said that he wore a mask that looked like something a clown or joker would wear. He's said to have been banished to the realm of Narnia, because he did outrageous things to very rich and powerful men and women. The claim could be real or fake, but it's believable in these crazy times. He broke into a very rich man's house, who was looked at by the public as if he were a god. This man, Sinsana, butchered the man's entire family in front of him. Then, after cutting off the limbs of this man's family members in front of him, he created a sacrificial circle of black magic and laid each body part inside the circle, lined inside the blood circle, drawing the limbs in with their own blood. After he was finished, he used a blade called Athame and cut his own wrist, letting the blood spray all over the circle and the rich man's face. Then, Sinsana covered himself in gasoline. After covering the rich man in gasoline, next to him while tied up, as both sat in the circle, the man crying, barely able to breathe, Sinsana chanted, "I will perish ye," into the depths of hell. After he finished the chant, he lit a match while staring into the rich man's face, looking deep into his eyes. The man, sobbing and drooling, looked back into Sinsana's eyes, but all he saw was blood-red stained eyes covered underneath the mask he wore. Only this time, it no longer looked like a clown. It looked like a crazed, creepy joker who seemed ready to laugh but stood there, throwing the match down at both of their feet. They both lit up in flames and burned to death inside of the circle. The next morning, the house was raided by FBI agents, and the circle was found with a bunch of burned corpses inside of it. The smell was rotten. Burned hair and flesh covered the backyard's scent. They were only able to distinguish the mask, but it was hard at first because the fire had caused the mask to melt into Sinsana's face. It caused a few agents to throw up and have to step away for a moment. This is what the man's face was said to have looked like, but nobody truly knows except those agents because back in those days, technology hadn't yet developed into what everyone has in the future. More and more, Lucy continued to study these things because, oddly enough, these weird stories all seemed like they had a place together in this strange world she lived in. She started to have visions of this man, Sinsana, a few months after reading about him. The thing that confused her, though, was that he didn't scare her or come off as if he meant harm. She would dream about that face, and it just made her feel safe. This mysterious man had a weird aura around him that was warm, friendly, and almost sweet rather than creepy. One night, while Lucy was asleep, she opened her eyes to a glowing light coming from outside. She got up from bed, went towards the window, and saw this man standing in the snowy field, looking at the stars. She gasped, "Oh my, am I dreaming?" She threw some clothes on, put on her night shoes, and proceeded to go outside. She went up to the man and asked lightly, "Are you the man that keeps showing himself to me? Are you that man, Sinsana?" For a moment, he didn't look at her. He continued to stare at the stars. Then he lightly turned his head, with the mask burned into his face on fire, and whispered, "Lucy, you must follow the stars. They will take you to the old man. They will lead you to the wardrobe. You must find the wardrobe and enter it. Once you enter the land of Narnia, I will be able to find you and help you. I'm not evil, my child. They make me out to be in this world you are trapped in. Let the truth be known, Lucy. Your sister made a pact with me before I burned and left this world. Your sister is somewhere in Narnia, Lucy. She's trapped between heaven, hell, and Narnia. She wants to go home. Aslan has been hunting for her for over a century. Lucy squealed. Wait, my sister is dead. How do you know her? Even the last man who approached me said she was trying to speak to me. She had a message. I watched a war general butcher her when I was little. How is any of this even real? What's going on, sir? I don't understand anymore. After her little rant, tears fluttered from her eyelids. The man looked down at her and said, "You must run away, Lucy. Time is running out. Your parents have been placed under black magic to keep you trapped here until you all die. You can't be stuck, but you must know, child, if you choose to listen to me, I won't be able to help you until you enter the land of Narnia. You will be hunted by shapeshifters in this land, while you're traveling to the man at the psych ward. You must be strong and keep a level head because they will be ruthless, and won't stop hunting you until they find you. If they find you, they will butcher you and eat your pineal gland, which is located in your forehead. It radiates more power than they've ever seen a child of any kind radiate in this realm. You're a gifted little girl, and they're watching you and imprisoning you because of it. But you're protected by your sister's light magic, as long as you're here in this land, within your hometown and parents' house. The only issue is, the shapeshifters are weakening her magic, keeping you safe because they've gotten to your parents. Your parents aren't really your parents anymore, Lucy. Heed my warning." Shortly after Sinsana said that, Lucy heard her mother scream from the front of the house. "Lucy? Oh Lucy, my darling, what are you doing out at such a late time in this snow?" Lucy quivered, and the man Sinsana vanished into a cloud of ashy smoke. Some time has passed since the night. Lucy spoke to Sinsana's spirit, outside of the little cabin in the snowy forest. Lucy is getting worried now because her mother and father are starting to act strange. The other night, she woke up to find her father standing in the doorway, just watching her with really weird glowing eyes. She pretended to be asleep, hoping he would go away, but he didn't. He continued standing there, watching her, never moving an inch from the doorway. She eventually started to get worried because this was happening every night. Then, eventually, she would fall asleep and the next day, her father would act normal again, as if nothing had happened. She started to think to herself, maybe I need to pack up a bag and hide it in the woods and make my escape when my mother tells me it's time for bed. She pondered on this idea for a couple of weeks, until she finally realized the time had come. It was time for her to escape because now, her father wasn't the only one standing at the door with those creepy eyes. Now, both her father and mother would stand at the foot of her bed, with really red glowing eyes. The whole time they were standing there, they would chant weird phrases that Lucy didn't understand. So, on a cold, windy morning, she packed her bag before going to school. This time, it was filled with clothing, snacks, water, matches, and a warm blanket. She ran out into the forest later that morning, and hid the backpack inside a little log about a mile from the house. Now I just have to make my escape before the sun goes down and my mother sends me to bed, she thought. Stuck in school all day with a bad, anxious feeling and a chest ache, she kept watching the clock until it finally hit 3 p.m. She headed home from school. The whole walk home, she kept thinking to herself how scary and cold it was going to be out in the woods all alone tonight and for more nights after that. She cringed for a moment at the thought of what Sinsana had told her about the shapeshifters that were going to hunt her, and how she would be in danger until reaching the man and somehow finding the wardrobe. She worried herself almost into oblivion about how bad it would be if these creatures caught her in a dark, snowy forest all by herself. She felt helpless for the first time in her life. She knew she had powers beyond imagination and was capable of things even she didn't understand yet. But the thought of these creatures tearing a concealed eye from her forehead, and eating it sent a chill down her spine. When she reached the house, her father and mother were standing on the porch as guards, waiting for their prisoner. They didn't say anything. They just stood there while she walked past them into the house. She stepped in the door, and there was a letter on the counter addressed to Lucy Pevensie. The parents still just stood on the porch, staring at her lifelessly through the front door. The mother finally spoke to her and said, "Read the letter, Lucy. It's important. Lucy peeled open the envelope and revealed the paper. It said, "Leave this realm, and we will burn your home and your parents' bodies to the ground." Lucy, shocked at this statement, locked eyes with her father. He said, almost in a crying tone, helplessly, "Lucy darling, they will kill us if you don't listen." Then, for a split moment, it almost felt like Lucy was speaking to her real father, and looking into his true soul beyond his eyes. Suddenly, the paper caught fire in her eyes. Stunned by this, she dropped the paper, and right before it hit the floor, it turned into ashes. After looking up from the floor in awe, she looked at the porch, and her parents were no longer standing there. Instead, they were sitting in the kitchen at the dinner table, confused because the father was reading the daily and the mother was drinking a small cup of tea. She said, "Mum, Dad." They looked up at her with a look of control in their eyes, as if they were puppets on a string. "Yes, darling, is something wrong?" Lucy, startled, said, "Weren't you guys just standing on the porch?" The father nodded and groaned. "What, Lucy? We've been sitting here at the table since you got home from school." Lucy realized, in this moment, that the shapeshifters had shown her what they would do to her parents if she chose to run away that night. Playing tricks, meddling in light illusions and projections. This was very mysterious condemned magic in many countries. This is when she realized this was real, not another nightmare. No more fairy tales she reads about at school. Now, contemplating everything, she thinks to herself, "Should I leave? If I head for the wardrobe, they will murder my mother and father." "Oh, Mum, Dad," Lucy cries to herself in her room. "What do I do? Why is this happening to me?" After some time and falling asleep into a nap in her reading chair, the mother comes into her room and says, "It's time for bed, Lucy. I'll be back in to tuck you in about 20 minutes, honey." Lucy says blankly, "Okay, Mother." Before the mother leaves the room, Lucy says, "Mum, wait." The mother turns around and says, "Yes, darling." Lucy says, "I just want you and Dad to know, whatever happens, I'm really sorry, and I love you guys more than you could ever imagine." The mother looks at her and says, "Oh, honey, nothing's gonna happen. You're a good girl who listens to what she's told, remember?" Lucy says, "Yes, I do, Mother, but please know, if you're in there somewhere, I love you and never meant any harm to come to you guys." The mother looks blankly at her and says, "Ah, nonsense. You calm yourself down." After she spoke, Lucy runs up to her and hugs her really hard for a good minute, then says, "Okay, Mum, I'll see you to tuck me in soon." The mum turns around and leaves the room, closing the door. Lucy immediately runs to her closet, grabbing her clothes, warm winter boots, and pants. Within a few minutes, she's fully dressed. She peeks out the door for a second and sees her parents making tea and talking. She lightly shuts the door, fast walks to the window, and peels it open. She proceeds to climb through it, shutting it behind her. She runs through the snow and before she makes it into the woods, looks back for a brief second and sheds a tear, knowing there's no going back now. Deep into the woods Lucy finds the log she hid her backpack in. She recovers the bag and throws it over her shoulders. She keeps running through the woods following the stars while the sun goes down. Eventually it's been about 2 hours she's been moving now, and she thinks maybe I should take a break, but then remembers those creatures are hunting her now. Except weirdly enough she hasn't seen anything weird or out of place. All she's heard is deer in the distance howling and coyotes. She continues to keep moving, but the longer she keeps going the more tired she gets. Suddenly she hears a branch snap behind her and sees a little girl run through the trees. The little girl starts chanting, "Lucy, oh Lucy, they're coming for you, they wanna eat you, Lucy. Lucy, oh Lucy, you're in danger." Lucy, scared, continues to keep sprinting following the stars. She eventually comes across a man riding in a small cart with a horse pulling it. He stops on the dirt road she runs out into. "Little girl, hey little girl, what are you doing out this late at night by yourself?" Lucy stares at him scared, thinking he might be one of the shapeshifters. She looks at him and says, "Are you gonna hurt me, sir?" He looks at her stunned. "Hurt you? Why would I hurt, little lady? I'm just a merchant traveling from Longvale. I've been on the road for about 2 days now." He says, "My wife wanted me to make a few more trips this time around so we can have enough coin to plant fresh crops this summer. So I've been making up extra shifts. You need a ride, young lady," he says. She looks at him and then looks back into the forest thinking about that little girl. Nothing could be worse than traveling alone and cold in this weather, she thinks to herself. She looks up at the man and says, "Yes sir, I need a ride to a hospital of sorts. It's kind of a place they keep crazy people at." The man weirdly looks at her and says, "Odd, a little girl heading to a psych ward hull this late at night and in the snow. Well, I don't wanna pester and get into your business hopping, young lady. I know exactly what hospital you're talking about. From here it'll take us about 4 days to cross over into Palm Country. Get comfortable in the back. I have a small bed you can sleep on through the trip." Lucy hops up into the man's cart and settles down on the bed. Throughout the next few days everything was calm. The man just kept traveling and stopping for a few hours to make little fires and cook some soup with his tools over the fire, then proceeding to get some shut-eye. Lucy thinks to herself, "How too odd, I haven't seen any shapeshifters or weird things since that night, when the little girl appeared in the forest." Then she thinks to herself, "How much longer till we hit Palm Country?" She speaks up and asks the man, "How much further are we now, sir? How much longer until we enter Palm Country?" The man turns to her, while calmly saying, "Oh, not more than a day now, little lady, we're almost there. I've made this trip 100s of times." Lucy calmly looks up at the stars and loses her focus for a minute. Feeling relaxed, she goes to say, "Where do you and your wife live, if I may ask?" Right as she finishes her sentence, the man looks back at her in the cart, and just as he's about to speak, an arrow goes right through the side of his head. Blood spurts out of his mouth and eyes as the eyeballs pop and his head bursts all over the back of the cart and Lucy's face. She screams at the top of her lungs, "Oh my God! They're coming, they've found me." The horse, screaming and neighing really loud, starts losing control of the cart. Lucy tries holding on, but they're traveling alongside a canyon that falls deep into snow and ice. She tries to stand up to take the reins and sees a weird creature over the hill, with a bow and arrow aiming straight at the horse's head. She goes to scream and grab the reins controlling the horse, but as she tries to do so, the creature fires the arrow and it pierces straight through the horse's eye, causing the horse to fall down the side of the canyon, with the cart going over with it. Just as the cart falls down the canyon, she gets wrapped inside a blanket and the cart makes a large crash into the side of a tree, sitting on a patch of ice. Lucy blacks out from hitting her head on the side of the cart. Chapter 3. In a strange moment of time in a different realm called Narnia, Aslan has been plotting heavily, as has been described. He wants out of this world, as he is in control here, but this isn't the place he wanted to be in. It has become like an isolated hell. Everything in the realm burns, including the castle Aslan lives in. It's constantly burning, which has angered Aslan for most of the time he's lived in Narnia trapped. It wasn't like this when he was first banished to this realm. It's the cause and effect of Sinsana's anger when he sacrificed himself in that sacrificial blood circle. Everything in Narnia has burned since he was banished to this land of insanity. No matter how much Aslan has tried to find the crazed burned Joker, he can't ever seem to get to him. Sinsana has become Aslan's biggest threat. The threat is a driving madness when you can't dispel what you're going against. Aslan has gone to extreme lengths to find this ghost, but he never gets through the barriers Sinsana has created for himself. Every time Aslan has sent out his shapeshifters on these searches, they never returned. Many unexplained things happen in this world. Shapeshifters are said to be unkillable, but none ever seem to come back when sent off on a journey to find this Joker. The reason Aslan hates the constant undying fires that burn throughout the entire land of Narnia is because when he was a young boy, a man slaughtered his parents. The man then tried trapping Aslan in the home they all lived in and burned it to the ground with gasoline. Aslan was lucky to escape alive by finding a small section in the basement that only he could fit through. His father had his head brutally chopped off in front of his wife, who then had her tongue cut out and fed to coyotes before being chopped in half by an old wood chopping axe. The man tried to get to Aslan, but Aslan was able to hide in little spots he would play in as a young boy. The man drenched the home in gasoline, and burned it down expecting to kill Aslan, because he blocked all exits out of the house. Aslan lived in the wilderness for years as a young boy, helpless and almost died multiple times but always somehow managed to survive. He liked to believe it was because of the universe, thinking he was a magician with mysterious powers. He was eventually found by sheriffs and forced into the custody of an orphanage. He spent a few years before becoming an adult in this home, where he fell in love with a young lady named Mixty Scarpath. She eventually left him when they both were released from the orphanage at 18 years old. She left him for a man who eventually went crazy and murdered her and her entire family while she was visiting them. The man was given the death penalty and hung from a tree in the desert, left to be picked clean by coyotes. Narnia has become an unbearable hell because of Aslan and Sinsana's traumas and anger. Before Aslan was banished to the realm, there was a beautiful king and queen who ruled the land, considered a prosperous time when the land was peaceful and filled with many different people born in this realm. Once Aslan ended up here, he started killing women and children in dark trails of the forest near cities, until he was hunted by teams of soldiers, whom he always killed. He eventually got into the city and continued his bloodthirsty campaign. He ate everyone he came across, while demons he came into contact with through a pact with the devil killed the rest, and ate their children's pineal glands. The city was filled with slaughter and blood, and eventually he got inside the castle and devoured the king and queen. He ate so much that his teeth were filled with remains of people's eyeballs and flesh. He slept for months because of the feeding frenzy. While he slept, the shape-shifting demons spent their time taking over the rest of the land. Eventually, nobody was alive except for those lucky enough to hide and avoid being seen or heard by the trees. This place is literally hell. It has been pure darkness, with people trapped and dying while hunting and fishing when they can, or being fortunate enough to bring food back to feed others in hiding. Every time someone leaves on a mission to provide, the men and women pray because most of the time, they never return. The men and women started feeling blessed, and as if some of their prayers were being heard when Sinsana entered this world. He started communicating with them through fires, providing knowledge of where to hunt and fish each day, as none of the shapeshifters were in those areas. However, he always warned them not to become too grateful and lose sight of the danger, as they only had a limited time before they would be discovered. Now, not many of them are being murdered, allowing many to repopulate. However, there are still far too many shapeshifters, so they are very cautious. As mentioned, shapeshifters cannot be killed, so they do not want to come into contact with one as they would be slaughtered. They are unsure why the shapeshifters have been disappearing, but they assume it has something to do with the face that keeps appearing to them in the fire. Sinsana has learned all of Aslan's secrets from his past life through careful telepathy. He must be careful not to overdo it, as he risks exposing his identity and being found in the realm. Sinsana also plays games on Aslan every night by showing him the faces of his tortured parents in intricate detail within his dreams, causing Aslan to be haunted and mope under his demonic presence. It is mental torture for Aslan in this freezing land of snow and ice, that is always on fire due to Sinsana's anger. Back in the real world, Lucy awakens lightly and opens her eyes slowly. She is wrapped up inside the blanket given to her by the merchant. It is absolutely freezing outside, with snow lightly hitting the back of the broken cart, which is in shambles. She is down on the side of the cliff where the horse fell, taking the cart along with it. Her head is hurting badly, with a big gash above her left eye and her leg partially sprained. She gasps lightly to herself and lets out a small cry, questioning her decisions. What have I done? Maybe I should have stayed back at the house. This was the worst idea I've ever made. Alone in the destroyed cart, she starts to crawl out slowly. She sees the merchant lying on the ice outside the cart, with his head squished by one of the broken wheels, causing the arrow to break and rupture his eyeball. She cries, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean for any of this." I really didn't. Why did I let you take me with you? She thinks about his wife and is haunted by the fact that the woman will never see her husband again, or get an answer to what happened to him. She crawls out of the cart and sits up on the ice, moving towards him with a push on her butt so she doesn't slip, feeling her leg burning from the sprain. Ugh! It hurts so bad, she cries. Collecting herself after a few moments and tears, she covers the man's face with the blanket he had given her. As she pulls away from the blanket, she suddenly becomes startled by a voice chanting a language she can't understand. Looking over the side of the cart up the steep cliff, she sees two figures standing at the top. Both shapeshifters start screaming a weird phrase, Lissa, Lissa, then both disappear. This phrase means not yet in Egyptian Arabic. Lucy looks around stunned, expecting the worst, but nothing happens. She stays laying against the cart for a few hours, rummaging through broken crates inside it. She finds a few pears and a closed tin of water to sustain herself. Eventually, she sees the sun peeling above the mountain, exclaiming, "Ah, thank the angels." It must be 5 or 6 now. With some light illuminating the canyon, she sees a glowing light in the distance and hears roosters crowing. She cries in happiness, saying to herself, "That must be a farm." She tries to stand up, but her leg hurts too much. Remembering she saw a roll of tape and cloth in one of the broken crates, she finds both items and a tiny blade. She carves a piece of wood off the side of one of the broken crates, long enough to use as a splint. The only reason she knows how to make a splint is because her father broke his leg when she was a child in Germany before the war. She remembers her mother having her grab gauze and tape, while her older brother broke a branch off a tree. She thinks about that time and becomes saddened, as it was a difficult time but everyone was together, and a broken leg was the biggest issue they faced. She then puts the piece of wood she carved against her leg and grabs another one she carves, placing it on the opposite side. She runs the cloth around it, until there isn't any more to use and tapes it up from top to bottom, until the tape is gone as well. She then breathes for a second before grabbing some stability on the side of the cart. She stands up and squeals in pain, but she is now capable of standing finally on the sprain. She grabs a tiny rucksack from the cart, and fills it with the last of the fruit left, a tin of soup the merchant had cooked the night before, and the last of the water. She then throws the rucksack over her shoulder. She limps over to the man's body and checks his pockets, finding a tiny stopwatch and his wallet. She grabs both and places them in the rucksack. Again, she repeats, "I'm sorry, sir. I'll make this right and tell someone you're here. They'll bury you and hopefully get word to your wife somehow." Then before she starts to limp off lightly over the drying ice, she looks back at the horse and sees its body sprawled in front of the destroyed cart. She says lightly, "You are in horsey heaven now, honey. I'm sorry. You were a beautiful animal." About 3 hours have passed and she's been limping through a field. She has only made it past 2 miles, but for her sprained leg, that is better than nothing. Eventually, she starts to get winded and wants to sit down somewhere, but she sees a tree line in the distance and smoke coming from in between them. She gasps, "That must be the farm." It has to be. I have to find help. She continues her journey and finally gets into the woods. After another few hours and a few stops to hydrate and eat something, she sees a small cabin with a cart parked in front of it, a small barn next to it with a rooster cage and horse pen. She gets excited. "Why, I've found help. I really have. Please help me." She makes it to the doorstep and collapses lightly on the step, taking a breather. She continues to knock on the door. "Hello? Is anyone home? Please, I need help. Something bad has happened." After a few moments, the door calmly opens and a long blonde-haired girl answers. "Yes, who is it? What's wrong? Is everything okay?" Lucy says, "Mom, I'm down here," and the girl looks down at the step. "Oh, darling, what's wrong? You look like you've been through trouble." The girl calls her father, Samuel. "Oh, Samuel, there's a young lady out front. She needs help." Samuel, a bearded man, comes to the door standing next to the girl and says, "Oh, little lady? Are you okay?" Lucy cries. "You have to help me, sir. I was traveling with a merchant. He was taking me to palm country and someone attacked us while I was in the back of his cart." Samuel asks, "Who was this merchant's name?" "Honey," she says. "You know, we never really exchanged names. I just explained where I needed to go after running into him hundreds of miles away. He helped me, took care of me for a few days while we traveled, and then last night he took an arrow through the eye, and his horse was also killed by one too. A man standing on a hill fired two of them, both causing death to him and his horse. We were traveling on the side of a cliff, and it caused me to be thrown down the side in the back of the cart. I blacked out and hit my head really hard, as you can see above my eye. My leg is also sprained really bad. I was able to make this split and it's taken me 6 hours to walk here because I heard your roosters crowing, and then saw the smoke from your chimney." Samuel, in disbelief alongside the girl, says, "Oh no, you were with Ulrich. He's a good friend of ours, honey. He's the only merchant who travels through this area. You guys were traveling along a deathly canyon. That's what the locals call it. I always told that stubborn bastard that the canyon would get him one day. He'd always laugh because he was the only merchant ballsy enough to travel it. And tell me, that canyon is like my ex-wife. She was always gonna get back at me one day. I guess if what you're telling us is true, he died with that stale sense of humor." "Ulrich," Samuel blurts out. The girl asks Lucy, "What is your name, honey?" Lucy says, "It's Lucy Pevensie. I'm scared. I think I'm being hunted by shapeshifters. I've been experiencing weird things lately and now I'm all alone traveling. I have to get to palm country." Lucy then faints on the steps. Samuel quickly says to the girl, "Go get the spare bed cleaned up and start a pot of soup and coffee. I'll get her inside and on the bed." The girl then quickly runs inside to complete these tasks. Samuel grabs Lucy, picking her up in his arms, and takes her inside to the spare room. He lays her down in the bed, and the girl finishes making it up. She says, "Samuel, I'm going to start cooking the soup now and making the coffee." Samuel says, "Okay, darling, I will sit alongside Lucy and watch her." He goes into the bathroom first, wets a rag, and grabs a bottle of peroxide, dampening a small paper towel with it. He cleans up her wound and puts a band-aid on it above her eye. Then he wipes down her face, removes the makeshift splint from her leg, and dresses her in the girl's spare clothes. The girl comes back a few hours later with a bowl of fresh soup and a cup of coffee. Lucy starts to open her eyes, looks at Samuel, then the girl, and asks, "Where am I?" Samuel calmly says, "No worries, honey, you're in our spare room. I cleaned your wounds, wrapped your sprain with fresh gauze and bandages after disinfecting it. I also took your worn clothes off and put new ones on. I'm sorry to invade your privacy, honey. I wasn't purposely trying to see you nude, but you were in rough shape, darling. I was a doctor for almost 10 years. If that makes you feel any more comfortable, my daughter has made you a fresh pot of soup and a cup of coffee." Lucy looks over at the stand next to the bedside and sees both. "Wow, sir. Thank you. That smells wonderful." She then looks at the girl and says, "Thank you, Mom." Samuel then asks her, "Will you be okay with me traveling for a few hours before sundown to find Ulrich down that canyon?" "Yes, please do, sir." I covered his face with a blanket he let me use. It's a rough sight, sir. I almost threw up, so please be cautious. Samuel then sighs sadly. "Oh, Ulrich, old friend, I'm sorry this has happened to you." He then says to the girl, "Honey, tonight write up a letter, and I'll mail it to Ulrich's wife. Let her know what's happened, and that we will be paying her a visit soon in Palm Country." The girl says, "Yes, Father, I will. I'm gonna watch over Lucy until you get back." Samuel smiles sadly and says, "Okay, ladies, I'll see you with results tonight." He then steps out of the room and heads to grab his gear. He grabs a rifle off of his gun rack and a furry overcoat. Before he leaves, he comes back into the room and says, "Okay, ladies, I'll see you later." Both look at Samuel and say, "Please be safe." Then the girl hugs him. Before he steps out again, Lucy says, "Thank you, sir. I'm sorry I brought this to your home. Please be careful. It might be best if you leave a gun with your daughter. I really do think there are creatures hunting me. Please don't think I'm crazy." Samuel looks at her and smiles. "Honey, I fought in 2 wars. The soldiers in my platoon used to think I was crazy because I've seen shapeshifters before. I know they're real. We are no simple people. You will be as safe as we are. I always knew that quiet life wouldn't last long. Danger is always there, and that's a risk we take every day living in this insane world. Now, I better be off. Time for talking later, ladies. I must be back before sundown. That's when it gets dangerous." Back in the realm of Narnia, Aslan grows impatient as his hunt for Sinsana has become increasingly difficult. The leads aren't there, and there's no trail. It's all dried up talk through the land. Sinsana is protected by some sort of white magic. Aslan grows angrier and angrier by the day, having the people who still live in this realm hunted daily, with only a few being killed by the week now. He's gotten hungry because of all his feeding when he first entered this realm. He's gotten really hungry. The shapeshifters aren't coming back all the time anymore, and when they do, they're only bringing back small portions of people for Aslan to feed on. His blood craze has become a bit of a curse in itself. On a cold snowy night in Narnia, there is an oddly disturbing peacefulness. Not many shapeshifters are hunting, and the people who are in hiding and still survive are fast asleep. There's a girl in this realm who's a spirit. She was trapped in Narnia after she was murdered. It's Lucy's sister. She got stuck here in between heaven and hell, because of how angry her spirit was after being forced to witness her 2 brothers be slaughtered in front of her. While that war general wrecked her, she came into contact with Sinsana when he entered this realm, and she asked a favor of him. The favor was that he astral project into the realm where her little sister Lucy Pevensie lived, and warn her that Aslan somehow found out about her existence outside of the realm of Narnia. This was because one day when she was at school being bullied without a blink of thought or realizing it, she caused a kid's nose to start bleeding all over his schoolwork due to him constantly bullying her. This magic she used so unknowingly with her mind opened a small hole in time that allowed insight to Aslan of her existence. As you know, a man had already approached Lucy to warn her through the same method for her sister, but while he was in the process, he mysteriously disappeared in the land of Narnia, while projecting himself to Lucy in that forest on that cold snowy night. Lucy's sister told Sinsana about this and warned him, but Sinsana promised her nobody would be making him disappear anytime soon. She felt comforted and believed him, so they created a spiritual pact, and he started keeping Lucy's sister safe because Aslan has also been hunting her since he knows of her existence. Unlike Sinsana, Sinsana warned Lucy, but as long as she's trapped in the realm she's in danger, and nobody can help her. The people she comes across are also in terrible danger as well. Nobody knows why Aslan wants Lucy, but there's a pretty good idea that it's because she has something he can offer the devil so he can be freed from the hell of Narnia and unleash his havoc in a different realm. Lucy is potentially Aslan's freedom from Narnia, so if she enters the wardrobe and steps foot into the land of Narnia, something unknowable could happen in that realm if followed through with properly. It's all too weird to understand, though. Sometime in the realm of Narnia, Sinsana takes a moment to tap into Aslan's mind again. He goes in, but this time he wants to go deeper. In doing so, he sees things that horrify him. It worries him so much that he reaches out to Lucy's sister, and that conversation went like this: "Sinsana, she's in danger. I failed you." Lucy's sister: What do you mean?" "Sinsana, you warned her. That's all that was asked of you." "Sinsana, I gave her planted information, not realizing how deeply I've been going into Aslan's mind. He tricked me, he played an illusion. He's more powerful than we imagined. He's known of my existence this whole time. He just hasn't been able to get his hands on me, which is what has made him angry. He must have thought or spoken with someone who gave him the knowledge, but he tricked me. Lucy is in more danger than we could have imagined. That man in the psych ward? He's the man who slaughtered Aslan's family. Aslan has been torturing him mentally for years. He placed a curse on him that causes him limited immortality, forcing him to keep seeing Aslan's face over and over again as a man and then as the lion. He would sit in a chair and stare into snowy trees, chanting Aslan's name repeatedly. Aslan made a pact with him, that if Aslan got Lucy to travel to him in the psych ward, he would wake up the man from his coma, and have him carry out a task against Lucy. He promised the man he would never forgive him for the slaughter of his parents, but that he would finally let the man die and pass on. For years, he's been forcing this man with the curse to keep seeing his face as the boy, a man, and the lion he's become. Then proceeded to force him to see the replay over and over again of him slaughtering Aslan's parents. This is what the man sees in his coma day in and day out. It's literal torture. The man promised him the task would be carried out. They made a pact, and Aslan tricked me because of it. Finally one night, before I approached Lucy, he showed me a fabricated memory of a man who supposedly hated him, so he made it out as if he's been torturing that man because of it. In doing so, he caused me to believe that this man was the key to Lucy's safety. I've been played. Lucy is in danger. She can't be caught by that man in the psych ward or approach him. The wardrobe is in the basement. Aslan placed him there as a sort of guard against her being able to enter it. Lucy's sister gasps, "Oh no, we have to figure something out. There's got to be a way. You have to go back into that realm and warn her." Sinsana says, "There's nothing we can do. It's all up to Lucy now. She has to battle this. It's as if we are stuck in a chess game, and Aslan almost has us at checkmate. I can't risk going back into Lucy's realm now that he's shown me false illusions. He could have traps set for both me and you. If that's the case, no matter if Lucy enters Narnia or gets killed in her realm, she will be out of luck, because if he captures us somehow due to exposing ourselves to his trickery, she will be alone once she enters into this land of Narnia, and we won't be able to help her. All we can do now is sit and wait. Either way, the odds don't look too stacked in our favor right now." Lucy's sister gasps, "Oh no, he fooled us. We should have known he wasn't as foolish as he's made himself out to be. We must rest, Sinsana, and meditate on prayer to the universe. With what you have told me, if it is true, my sister is on her own now. We have to hope she really can find her way around that man in the psych ward, and enter the wardrobe. There's nothing we can do without making this situation worse than it already is. We have to have faith. My sister is a strong-minded girl, and I have to believe she will be able to overcome the obstacles placed in front of her." Chapter 4. Samuel began his travel to the canyon where Ulrich was lying at the bottom, no longer alive. He had been traveling for a few hours in his wagon. He kept thinking to himself how sick to the stomach he had been since Lucy arrived at his doorstep with the news. He had known Ulrich for a long time, ever since they first met back when they lived in a town called Mill Valley, deep in the mountains within Palm Country. They had met while working at a local coal mine after Samuel returned from deployment. At first, neither of them really liked each other, but one evening, Ulrich had been working a long shift and forgot his gear in Section B of the mine. Not thinking clearly, he went in to retrieve it without telling anyone, and ended up falling into a hole. As he was about to slip down the 5,000-foot drop, Samuel came running and saved him. After the incident, Samuel reassured Ulrich and promised not to tell anyone. They both agreed that the job was hard enough as it was, and they didn't need any additional punishment. Ulrich was grateful for Samuel's trust and understanding, and they both walked back to the dirt lot to wait for their wives. Ulrich invited Samuel and his wife, Maria, to have dinner with him and his wife, Lily. They all enjoyed a meal together and shared stories over whiskey. As they got drunk, they began to talk about the incident, which made Ulrich's wife emotional. However, Ulrich reassured her that as long as he was with Samuel, he was safe. Overall, the story highlights the strong bond and trust between Samuel and Ulrich, as well as the importance of looking out for one another in difficult times. He said this to lighten the mood and make everyone laugh, which eventually did. From that night on, they all became really good friends and spent years together. Ulrich became Samuel's right-hand driller at the mine. Eventually, the workforce was laid off, and the mine was shut down due to a lack of coal to be mined. Ulrich went on to become a merchant, buying himself a nice horse and cart to travel in. Him and his wife got a divorce, and he ended up marrying another woman a few years down the road named Bethany. Samuel ended up retiring and going home to his wife, where they had their daughter, Rose. As she got older, his wife started to get sick. She eventually died from cancer. Up until her death, Ulrich delivered medicine and whatever other goods Samuel requested of him. Samuel thought about these good times for a moment while traveling in his wagon to the canyon. He eventually got within sight of the canyon after 4 hours had gone by. The closer he got, the sicker he became. Eventually, he finally made it and pulled off to the side. He got out of the cart, and gave his horse some grass, so it would rest a moment. He grabbed a long pick from the bed of his cart and grabbed a piece of rope. He also drew his rifle from the side of his cart, and threw it over his shoulder by the sling. He went to the edge of the canyon and looked down it. There, Ulrich was lying next to the destroyed cart with the blanket covering his head. Samuel sighed in sadness. "Ah, poor fella, you were a good man, brother. Your wife will learn of this. We will take care of her needs and provide her reassurance." He then looked up at the sky and saw the sun starting to go down. Samuel said to himself, "I better get him out of this canyon before the sun goes down. Don't want to get caught out here and run into bandits." Samuel pierced the dirt with the pick and tied the rope off onto it. He then tied the rope around his waist, and started to head down the side of the cliff. When he finally got to the bottom, he saw a tiny backpack lying in the bed of the cart, buried partially under a broken crate. He grabbed it, saying to himself, "This must be Lucy's." Then he headed over to Ulrich's body, leaned down, and uncovered his face. He made a small frown when he saw the gruesome sight out of sadness, but it wasn't anything he hadn't already witnessed in the war, so it didn't make him cry or puke. He grabbed Samuel's body and tied him into the rope on his back. He then gripped the rope with his hands, and started to climb up the side of the canyon, with Ulrich's corpse on his back. Eventually, he reached the top of the canyon and took Ulrich's body over to the cart, placing it in the back of the bed. He covered it with some cloth he had and said a small prayer for Ulrich's soul. He then went to the edge of the canyon, where the pick was, and removed it from the ground. He threw the rope and pick in the back as well. He continued his travels in the cart back to his home. At this point, the sun had gone down about 2 hours ago. Everything was relaxing and calm, with sounds of birds and owls in the distance. As he was traveling through a small forest, he saw a figure standing in the distance in the middle of the road he was traveling on. He started to calm his horse and slow it down. Eventually, he came to a complete stop and told his horse, "You stop here, don't move." He stepped out of the cart, grabbed the rifle, and walked towards the figure. He yelled, "Get out of here, you son of a bitch. I've slain generals in war. You think I'm gonna run from you? You're what killed Ulrich, aren't you? I'll slaughter all of you stupid bastards." He then came to a complete stop, and chambered the rifle, because the creature was walking closer to him. He aimed it straight at the creature and yelled, "This nation was built on corpses." Then he fired the rifle at the creature. Just as the smoke dissipated from the barrel, the creature was no longer standing in front of him. He paused for a moment and listened in silence. He heard the sound of feet rushing at him from his left. Right as he turned to aim the rifle that way, a creature slashed the side of his face with what felt like a blade that was on fire. He yelled out and stumbled back towards the wagon. "Ah, you bastard! Never could play fair even in war against men." He then aimed his rifle at the sky and fired into the sky. A bunch of birds flew from the trees. He grabbed a small cloth from his left pocket, after stowing the rifle, and wiped the blood from his face. He turned around and ran to the wagon, jumped into the seat, and grabbed the reins. Slapping the reins down, he yelled, "Ride, ride horse." The horse started taking off, and all of a sudden, while he was traveling down the road, He saw multiple figures standing in the tree line. This time, they didn't look like creatures. They looked like real people. He yelled, "Bandits!" While holding one set of reins, he chambered the rifle and shot at the closest figure that was running toward the cart from the tree line. He blew the man's face clean in half. As the bullet pierced the man's face, he heard the man cry and hit the ground. Suddenly, 3 arrows flew at the side of the cart, but luckily only hit the wood. He chambered the rifle again, and fired at another man standing in the tree line with a bow, hitting the man clean in the chest. The rest of the bandits kept firing arrows, but none made contact with the wagon. Eventually, Samuel was clear of the forest, and made it into the open field about a half a mile from his home. He kept the horse going at a steady speed, until he finally made it into his tree line, that led into the forest where his cabin was. He made it back to the home and stopped the cart. He jumped out, running to the front of the wagon. He took his horse off the reins and pulled it into the small barn they had next to the house. At this point, Rose came running out of the house with Lucy lightly limping behind her. Rose asked, "Father, what's wrong?" Samuel yelled, "Get back into the house, Rose. It's not safe out here. There are bandits about a half a mile back. I was attacked by a creature and then the bandits ambushed me as well." Rose turned around and ran into the house, telling Lucy, "Go hide in the room. Me and Father will protect you." Lucy went back into the room and Samuel came running into the house. As soon as he got through the door, an arrow hit him in the left shoulder. He made a small yell and turned around, chambering the rifle again. He leaned around the door, and spotted a man running at the house with a bow on his back, and a sword in his hands. Samuel aimed the rifle right at the man and blew his leg clean off. The man fell to the ground screaming. Just as Samuel was about to run out and stomp on the man's head due to his adrenaline rush, a creature crawled out from under the wagon and dug its claws into the man's shoulders, slithering off with the man into the woods while he screamed helplessly. Samuel slammed the front door shut and yelled to Rose, who stood in shock, "Rose, grab your rifle from the rack. I may need your help." A few hours went by and Samuel sat in a chair in front of the door, with his rifle aimed at the door. But nobody ever tried to break in and nothing was heard coming from outside the house. Eventually, he looked out a small window, got up, and went into his room. There was nothing outside but darkness. None of his animals made any noise either. Finally, he settled down and Rose dug the arrow out of his shoulder. She disinfected the wound and bandaged it. After about another hour of silence, Lucy broke the quiet by asking Samuel, "Are you okay, sir? Did you get Ulrich?" Samuel looked over at her and said, "Yes, darling, I'm fine. I've got more battle scars than just a little arrow. I'm just a bit in shock that this is all happening at my home, is all, darling." Rose looked at her father and said, "I'm glad you didn't die out there. Me and Lucy got worried something got to you." Samuel said, "I'm okay, honey. No need to worry. I'm just thankful neither of you were hurt. That's all that matters to me." The next morning, Rose was on edge the entire time she cooked breakfast for Samuel and Lucy. The house had a good smell aside from the tension. It smelled like coffee, bacon, and fresh sizzling eggs. Lucy had just woken up in the spare room, and walked out to the smell of the wonderful breakfast being prepared by Rose. She looked at Rose and asked, "Would you like me to help you set the table, Rose?" Rose looked at Lucy and said, "Yes, please, Lucy. I'd kindly appreciate it." "Where's Samuel?" Lucy asked. Rose replied, "He went out to feed the chickens and horses. He took his rifle with him, so I don't think he was just going outside to do that." Outside, Samuel had searched a good mile around the house, making sure nothing was watching his home. There weren't any signs of any more bandits, and those creatures weren't anywhere to be seen in the daytime, because they mostly used the night to attack helpless people. They hid in the shadows, waiting to strike down on the prey they had in front of them. Samuel hiked a good mile up the road where he had escaped the bandits the night before. He was looking for the bodies of the 2 men he had killed with his rifle that night. Oddly enough, he didn't find any corpses, despite searching the entire area. At this point, he knew he had to find out where Lucy was headed, because he had to get her to the destination. He grumbled to himself, "Well, that's probably enough searching. I'm ready for breakfast." He headed back to the house, and on his way up to the door, he walked to the back of his wagon, where he looked at Ulrich's body and said, "Don't worry, old friend, I'll be burying you after breakfast." Then he walked into his home, placed the rifle on the gun rack, and took his boots off at the side of the door. Rose called out to him, "Father, it's time for breakfast. Lucy and I have set the table." Samuel went into the kitchen and saw both ladies sitting at the table, waiting for him to eat breakfast with them. Lucy asked him, "Sir, is everything okay out there? Did you find any of the men you killed?" Samuel replied, "No, I didn't." "Oddly enough, I think those creatures may have gotten to the bodies or something. I couldn't really tell you, to be honest." Lucy sighed and said, "I'm sorry for what I have brought here to your home, sir. I didn't mean to place you and your daughter in danger." Samuel proceeded to grab the jug of milk, and pour himself a glass before digging into his plate of food. After eating some of his eggs and bacon, he looked at her and said, "It's okay, darling. We live in weird times. Those bandits are none of your concern. They've been robbing families out here for years. Damn bums, can't leave a good family in peace. Always have to try stealing other people's things. Those are just people who don't want to work for a living like the rest of us fools." Rose asked her father, "What are we gonna do? Those creatures are going to keep attacking us until they kill all three of us now." Samuel says, "We must take Lucy to her destination. We have to finish what Ulrich started and died trying to accomplish." "Where did you say you were trying to get to, Lucy?" Samuel asks politely. "I'm trying to get to a psych ward," so Lucy replies. "There's a man in there I was told I must find and speak to. He has knowledge of a wardrobe I have to find and enter." Samuel looks at her and says, "Well, this is definitely weirder than I expected, but nonetheless it must be done. Who told you about this man, Lucy?" "You know, I can't really describe it properly. I was told by some kind of spirit. Its name was Sinsana," so Lucy explains. Suddenly, Samuel remembers that name. "Sinsana," he says. "I've heard that name spoken before. I've heard an old tale about a young boy who was broken and abused by his family. It said that he became a musician due to his anger and frustration, for the lack of discipline around him. He was once in love with a lady who wronged him. She left him in the blink of an eye when he got rich and famous. So the stories say that he lost his way and started killing rich and powerful men and women in a conquest to gain eternal power." "Have you heard the rest of the story?" "Yes, sir. I read about him killing a man's family and sacrificing himself in a blood circle," Lucy confirms. "That's about all anyone knows of the man. He's like a ghost. Not much is known about his past or the real him. It's just said that he went crazy and killed those people. But nobody knows why he did it." Samuel explains, "This man approached me and told me I needed to get to the psych ward," so Lucy adds, "Then we leave in the morning. We'll have to wait it out one more night here and hope none of us are killed. I'll do everything in my power to protect you, Lucy. Just know, when we start traveling, I could be killed and so could my daughter. We are in this with you, whether we want to be or not now," Samuel states. The rest of the day they spent relaxing and trying to make the best of the current situation. Later that night, nobody slept properly due to the circumstances. Nothing happened that night, though weirdly enough, everything was quiet and still. Eventually, sunrise came up and Samuel started packing his things up alongside Rose. Lucy had her backpack that Samuel brought back for her, and the little rucksack she took from the cart. Everyone was ready to go now. From here, it should only take us about 8 hours to get to Palm Country. Once we enter Brook Village, I'll ask the locals for word on the psych ward, Samuel informs Lucy. "Thank you for everything you guys have done for me, sir. You are good people. I really don't know where I'd be without you and your daughter." Lucy expresses her gratitude. "No worries. We are all in this world together. If we don't help each other, how can we ever expect to survive such terrible times?" Samuel replies. About 3 hours had passed by, and they had been traveling during beautiful sunshine. Lucy and Rose sat in the back of the cart talking, while Samuel focused on the road ahead with his rifle stowed next to him the entire time. The journey continued throughout the day at a normal pace. Samuel stopped from time to time to let his horse graze on the grass he had brought with him. He would brush the horse to calm it from the long trip. Lucy and Rose continued to drink water and eat snacks that Rose brought with them. They would laugh and talk in the back while traveling about things they liked to do as children. Eventually, after a few hours had gone by, Samuel said lightly, "Ladies, we've almost crossed into Palm Country. Soon enough, we will make it to Brook Village. Once we get there, we will stop at one of the inns and have dinner together at one of the restaurants. I figure, with you being hunted by these shape-shifters, Lucy, it's best we stick as close to other people as we can." Lucy asked, "Won't that put them in danger, sir?" Samuel replied, "Yes, Lucy, but we're all in danger as it is. Plus, these towns have guards, so if anything does happen, it's less likely to happen in a populated area filled with other eyes." Lucy said, "Well, I do admit a nice bed and meal sound pretty good. Honestly." Rose chuckled and said, "Yes, I agree. Father, it would be nice to eat at a restaurant again like we used to do before our mother passed away." For a moment, Samuel thought happily about his wife and then got saddened. They continued to travel together through a mysterious dead land filled with blood and bodies. Lucy asked, "What is this? Why are there so many dead people here, Samuel?" Samuel explained, "Outside of cities and villages, there are these places called dead lands. As you know, we live in times where the government doesn't have eyes on every inch of the land. So, they created these places called dead lands. Most of the bodies out here are bandits, but there are sadly innocent people as well who got caught here at the wrong time. We are even taking a risk as it is right now, traveling through here, but there's no other way into Brook Village because it's surrounded by dead lands. They used to send less fortunate people out here to grab bodies and burn them in a pile. But it's gotten to the point where so much slaughter typically happens in these places that they just gave up, and now the bodies just rot into the soil, eventually turning into bones." Lucy quivered and cringed at Samuel's words, as did Rose. Lucy then asked, "What do you mean by less fortunate, sir?" Samuel replied, "People who break the law and get caught with a bounty on their heads." Lucy said, "That's sick." Samuel responded, "It's the way it is right now. King Lucian still hasn't built a stable democracy, so we live in wild times where the law of the land relies on whoever kills the other man or woman." As he finished talking, Lucy gasped, "Do you see that? There's a man standing in the field out there." Samuel and Rose looked, and they saw a tall figure holding a weird staff. "Shit!" Samuel exclaimed, "that's a shapeshifter, but I think it's a more powerful one, like one of the wizards an old commander talked about seeing back in the war." "Hold on, ladies, I'll get us to Brook Village. We are almost there," he yells, "Ride horse," while throwing the reins down. Suddenly, he sees a big gate that leads into the village, and there are 6 guards standing next to it. Lucy continues to watch the figure, but it just stands there looking at them, not moving. Samuel comes to a halt. One of the guards approaches the wagon and says, "What are you traveling here to Brook Village for, sir?" Samuel responds, "I'm just trying to get into the village to pass through in the morning. I have my daughter and her friend here alongside me. We'd like to get a room at one of the inns, and have dinner before moving on in the morning." The guard says, "Okay, sir. I must ask the 3 of your names first before I can let you in." Samuel replies, "I'm Samuel Gradvich. This is my daughter, Rose Gradvich, and her friend, Lucy Pevensie." The man says, "Wait, hold on, we have heard of that name." Stunned, Lucy turns around from looking into the distance at the shapeshifter that still hasn't moved an inch. She says, "What? How does anyone here know my name, sir?" The guard goes over to a man who stands behind the gate, and the man whispers something in his ear. Then the guard comes back to the wagon. Samuel says, "Look, sir. We don't mean any trouble. We are just traveling in search of a specific area," the guard says. "No problem. I have been given specific information that one of our town wizards wants to personally speak to Lucy. You guys may enter and get yourselves acquainted with food and drink, then register into the inn, Oak Palace. There you will be approached by this man. His name is Hendrick Malachi," Samuel lightly says. "Thank you, sir. But how odd that anyone would know of Lucy's arrival. We've never spoken to anyone or known anyone by such name," the guard says. "It's nothing to worry about. He's a wizard. Wizards guard our villages from creatures and shapeshifters. Palm Country has become a vile place for such occurrences." Lucy looks back into the distance and no longer sees any figures standing there. The man yells, "Open the gate." The gate eventually opens up, and he guides Samuel through it. When they enter Brook Village, the guard guides him into an open area, and tells him to park the wagon in it, and untie his horse's reins to take it over to the local horse pen. Samuel does as instructed and parks next to one of 15 other wagons. Lucy and Rose hop out of the back, and Samuel unties his horse. He leads it to the pen, and a man greets him. "Hello, sir. The toll fee for your horse will be 50 coins. Samuel coughs up the coin after pulling a sack from his right pocket. Then the man says, "For an additional 20 coins, we will brush and wash the horse's coat for you and feed it special treats." Samuel thinks for a moment, then looks his horse in the eyes and says, "You've been a good lad. I'll do this just for your trouble, beautiful boy." Then he hands the horse over to the man. Samuel, his daughter, and Lucy start to walk to the local restaurant called Oak Tavern. They step inside, and Lucy happily says, "It smells wonderful in here." Samuel nods his head, and so does Rose in agreement. The three of them are greeted by a small lady who says, "Just the three of you?" Samuel says, "Yes, Mom, thank you." The lady leads them to a small booth in the corner of the tavern, and leaves them each a piece of paper. "I'll get drinks. What would you three like?" she says. Samuel says, "I'll go with a glass of bourbon." Rose says, "I'd like a water, please, Mom." And Lucy asks for the same thing. Chapter 5. He's sprinting. "Stop him!" yelled a man as he chased a young teenager through a swamp with his son. The boy had robbed his home in the night in order to feed his sick cat, which had been dying from a chronic illness. The malnutrition was a whole different level of torture in itself, so that was the least the boy felt he could do for it. The animal had been his best friend for years, a beautiful companion that shared the genes of a baby panther and protected him when his parents would leave him alone unattended for hours as a baby. The cat would bring him food as he got older, and clean his dirt sores from the lack of care. Eventually, he raised the beautiful animal into a big black panther that would go on runs with him and help him steal things so they could survive. They would then go back to an abandoned barn in a small forest that he had made home for them some time after running away from his parents. The panther would cuddle him every night and morning, kneading on him to calm his nerves and help tame his anxiety. These memories were what haunted the boy as he was in his final moments with this gorgeous animal. He was fully determined to outrun the people chasing after him, and make it home to feed his cat. While he was sprinting, he saw a bear grazing behind a tree. He was now a good distance from the man and his son. The boy leaned down into a crouched stance and snuck by the bear slowly. The man and his son came running toward the same area, and the bear stopped grazing. It looked up from the ground, turned around, and stared deadlocked at the man and his son. They realized they were in the presence of a fully grown, hungry bear. The man said quietly to his son, "Run, boy," but the terrified kid just stood there, helpless. The man proceeded to turn around and sprint, but before he could, the bear lunged straight at him, and ripped his head clean off his body with one slash from its paw. The boy started to scream, "Father, no, please." It didn't matter. The bear was already in a full lunge at the small kid and slashed at the boy's chest, ripping it open and splashing blood all over the side of the tree. The bear roared loudly and started eating on the kid's corpse. While the bear was having its meal, the other younger teen was lying quietly, sobbing behind a tree. After a few hours, the bear had eaten plenty for its liking and walked off somewhere to hibernate. The boy finally stood up from where he had been laying. He looked at the corpses, which were now almost entirely skeletons, and apologized, saying, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean for any of this. My cat is dying. She's been by my side since I was a baby. I only wanted to feed her a meal. Please don't haunt me for this. I really never intended for any of this to happen." Eventually, he returned back to his home, walked in through the barn doors, and saw his beautiful girl lying on some hay, snoring lightly. He approached her and said, "Hey girl, how are you feeling?" She opened her eyes and started to purr. He smiled, and she began to meow. Running his hand over her soft head, he lovingly pulled a fresh cut of deer meat from his sack. "Here you go, girl. This is for you, to help take your mind off the pain." The cat, looking at him adoringly, meowed and grabbed the meat from the palm of his hand with her teeth. She munched down on a few more pieces. He drank some water, and they both sprawled out. She laid across his lap happily. She stared at him for almost 2 hours while he sat there, looking at her lovingly. Eventually, both he and his beautiful cat, whom he had named Galaxy, fell fast asleep. The next morning, he woke up in a bit of a daze. As he went to stretch his arms and yawn, he noticed his cat was still in his arms, completely still and motionless. He softly said her name, "Okay, Galaxy, I need you to get up, girl." But there was no movement or response from the animal. Again, he said, "Come on, girl. I've got to find us breakfast and use the bathroom." Still, the animal lay there motionless. He finally lightly pushed on her back, and her head rolled to the side of his leg. "Galaxy," he screamed, "no, no, no, please, girl, please wake up." But she didn't respond. The beautiful creature had died in her sleep. She had the best last dinner she could have thought of and lovingly passed away in the young boy's arms. As they slept through the night, nature had taken her spirit from this realm and transferred it to the next one. For the rest of the day, the young boy lay around sobbing next to her, just staring at her lifeless corpse, sobbing, cursing at God. After a few days had gone by, the moping started to dry up and turn into a scar. The boy realized he had to move on and keep going no matter what. His beautiful Galaxy wouldn't have wanted him to give up. She died happily and full from a good meal, so that's what he kept in his mind. It was the only thing keeping him from reaching the peak of insanity. He traveled some miles to a local village called Ranrock Musk. He sold some gems and jewelry he had also stolen from the man's house. They gave him 1,000 coins for everything he had, which in those times was the money of a rich man. The merchant also bargained with him to buy a little spell book. The man claimed that if he used it properly, the boy could summon entities and brew potions, which he may have use for in the future. The last item he purchased was a shovel to bury his cat. On his way out of the ragged village, the boy was approached by 2 men. Both approached him very quickly and told him they needed him to come with them. He immediately got spooked and started to run away. Sprinting through the town, he realized, looking back, that the men were gone as if they had just vanished. He paid a merchant who was traveling to the closest city near his area where the barn was that he lived in to take him as close as possible. A few days later, when he made it back to his home, he saw that the barn was still untouched as he expected it to be. He ended up burying his panther, and saying a small prayer that he read from the spell book. The prayer was a shield of light that was claimed to protect spirits in the afterlife. As the years went by, the boy became colder and colder over time, witnessing more ruthless events. He spent 3 years in the army and became a lieutenant. When he got out, he bought a beautiful home, and built a small recording studio, with the latest technology at that time. He went on to become a musician and was called a sociopath by some. The boy's name was Sinsana, and you already know the man he became after murdering that rich family, and sacrificing himself to the land of Narnia with the Joker mask burned into his soul. What you don't know is that the little spellbook helped him perform that ritual and enchant the mask he wore so that after death, wherever the next realm he went, he would only be seen with that mask burned into the flesh of his face. After Lucy, Rose and Samuel finished eating the wonderful dinner they enjoyed together. They got a room at the inn with 2 beds. They settled in as much as they could in those times. Samuel told Lucy and Rose that he was going to go out for an hour or 2 to search for the wizard that the guard spoke to them about at the gate. They both listened and agreed that it was the best thing for him to do. After a few hours of talking and getting to know each other better, Lucy and Rose realized that Samuel hadn't returned. Both started to get worried because Samuel said he'd only be gone for an hour at most. It was already reaching around 9 p.m., and they hadn't heard a sound from the hallway outside their room. Lucy broke the silence and confusion after realizing he was still gone and said, "Rose, maybe we should go out and look for him." Rose replied, "I don't think that's a good idea, Lucy. Father said for us to stay here. Plus, you know Samuel. He's not exactly a weak man." Lucy lightly agreed with her point but still had a bad feeling in her stomach. After waiting for 3 more hours, they really started to get worried. It was almost 12 p.m., and they still hadn't heard anything. "Okay, Lucy," said Rose, "this is really bad. He should have been back. He left around 6, and it's almost 11:45. Rose agreed with Lucy this time in a panicked voice. Lucy said, "I think we need to go find him." Rose, "This is really bad now." So they both got their shoes and coats on, and proceeded to walk out of the inn's room. The hallway was dead silent. "Not a word," Lucy said lightly. "It's very odd. Why is it so quiet?" "I haven't heard a noise for hours," Rose agreed and said, "This is bad, Lucy. I hope Father isn't dead. What could have happened to him?" They ventured down the hall, coming upon the stairway leading down to the inn's check-in area. Lucy said at the top of the stairs to Rose, "Maybe someone will be able to help us." So they walked down the stairway. When they reached the bottom step, they looked around for a worker, but there wasn't anyone on this floor either. It was just dead silent. "Where is everyone, Rose?" Lucy asked. "I don't know, Lucy. Your guess is as good as mine," Rose replied. Both walked towards the front doors, and saw that it was dark outside through the tiny windows on each door. Lucy opened the right door, and Rose walked outside behind her. There was nobody in the streets. No people walking around. Nobody smoking a cigarette. No animals like dogs or cats anywhere to be seen. Just snow falling down in the dark village, hitting the ground very slowly. Lucy, very confused, looked at Rose and said, "What's going on? Where did everyone go? Are we alone?" Startled, Rose said, "Lucy, there's a man watching us from the side of that building." Lucy looked straight at the building across the street and saw a tall, shadowy figure with a pale face staring at them with a smile. "Hey," Lucy called out. "What's going on? Where is everyone?" The figure grinned and turned around, walking into a dark little corner between the building and another one next to it. The figure vanished into the darkness. Lucy gasped, "Rose, we have to follow him." Lucy turned around because Rose never answered her and made a shriek. "Rose," she yelled. Rose was gone. She had disappeared. Lucy, beyond confused, looked all around her but couldn't see anyone. It was just pitch black with snow falling from the sky. "Oh no, not again. Please, just be a nightmare," she said. She closed her eyes for a few moments and then reopened them, hoping to wake up back in the room, but she was still standing in the same spot, looking at snow and darkness surrounding her. "Oh no, please, this can't be happening," she said, falling into a panicked state. As she panicked, she heard a girl scream at the top of her lungs, "Lucy, they're coming. Lucy, run." Lucy, for a moment, just stands there, pale and shocked from how close that voice was. She looks to her left when she hears sudden movements, and sees a figure looking directly at her with glowing red eyes. She panics even more now, then looks to her right and sees another one, both of them blocking her from making a run in either direction. "Please stop," she cries, but immediately both start sprinting at her. The reality hits that both of them are in a full lunge at her. She starts to sprint straight towards the dark corner that the other figure disappeared into. She's in a full run now, looking back occasionally and seeing both of these figures running at her when they suddenly start screaming in a chant, Verskligen Sorglings Fleisch, which means devour baby's flesh in German. Lucy continues to run when she comes across a door at the end of the alley. She opens the door as fast as she can and slams it behind her, then grabs a small chair she sees next to a small table in the area she just entered and rigs it under the handle, blocking the creatures from getting through the door. Suddenly, the door starts rattling and banging. One of the figures is slamming into the door, trying to break it open. Lucy walks around the building, looking at the reflection of her feet for a guidance. When she walks into a tall door with gold trimming on the sides of it, it has the shape of a man's lion's head as the design. Suddenly, both sides of the door blast open and she's greeted by another room with a door right next to a massive old oak wardrobe. The wardrobe. Lucy screams. "Wait," she says. "I thought the wardrobe was located in a psych ward." She walks up to the wardrobe slowly, still listening to the banging sound coming from behind her on the door that leads out to the alley. As she gets closer, words start to appear on the wardrobe, saying, "This is an illusion, Lucy. The real wardrobe is protected by a demon. Don't let any of this fool you." Suddenly, she loses consciousness and sees a pure white field filled with wilting black roses. "Hello," she says in awe. A beautiful girl starts to appear and says very nicely, "Lucy, you must get to the wardrobe as quickly as possible. Do not waste time." The shapeshifters are getting angry, because they aren't able to enter the village's energy shield that the wizard has placed around it. They are starting to enter your dreams. This is the only way they have access to you inside the village now, so every time you sleep, they will hunt you in your mind. You're in great danger, Lucy. Wake up. The girl screams, suddenly startled out of her sleep. Lucy screams and sees Samuel and Rose standing over her on the bed. "Lucy," Samuel says, "are you okay? What's going on?" Rose asks the same thing. Lucy looks around the room slowly because of her dazed mindset. "I don't know," so she says softly. "I was in a dream, I think," Samuel says. "You blacked out, Lucy, after we all had dinner. You said something really odd to me and Rose, like you had been poisoned after drinking the rest of your water, then just hit the floor, suddenly unconscious." Lucy, startled, says, "What? I thought you went out to look for the wizard, sir. Me and Rose were having a conversation. I don't understand what's happening," Samuel says with a sudden flinch. "Oh no," Rose asks him. What do you mean, father?" Samuel says. "Someone slipped a DMT potion into Lucy's drink at the restaurant. They're created to create false memories, and open a portal for otherworldly beings to have access to that person's mind. Someone is watching us, Rose," Samuel says. "There's an informant behind the walls of this village. We are all in grave danger." Chapter 6. Hendrick Malachi enters through a mysterious doorway that leads into a dark, dank room that smells like rotten flesh. He comes to a standstill and looks into the dark corner to his left and says, "Speak to me, serpent," and whispers fresh insight for your wizard. After a few moments a slithering sound starts to come from the corner. He glares at, and a weird slimy creature appears from the corner and says, "Malachi, I was told the child has entered the village. Is this truth?" Malachi answers back, "Yes it is. She is currently at Oak Palace in room 27. The creature mumbles and laughs disturbingly, then speaks saying, "She must not leave this village. You must lead her to the wardrobe under the castle. She must enter the psych ward. She is to be sacrificed to Aslan before 12 am midnight. If we do not carry out this task, your village will be burned to the ground. Women, men and children slaughtered, animals burned at the stake, horses gutted and blood washed over the streets." Malachi, frightened, says, "Yes, King, I will carry out, and have her escorted there. She has a man and his daughter with her. What shall I do about these two?" The creature snarls and says, "Have them both killed. We don't need anything interfering with Aslan's plan." Malachi says one final thing before the creature places its face into the light, showing the disturbing sight to Malachi for the very first time. "Kling, I will provide you with results, but please don't eat my soul." The creature laughs profusely while the face of a baby and demon enter the vision of Malachi. He flings himself back at the door, letting out a yell. "Ah, Lucy, wake up, startled from a beautiful dream." Lucy opens her eyes to Rose and Samuel. Rose continues to tell her to wake up until she finally does. She looks at Roseanne, says, "What is it?" Rose says, "Father was approached by 2 guards this morning in the marketplace. They told him to have you ready by 12. You're supposed to meet this wizard, Hendrick Malachi. The guard told us about him at the gates." Surprised and dazed, Lucy says, "Okay, let me get ready." After some time, Lucy gets ready and approaches Samuel and Rose on their beds. She says, "Okay, I'm ready. I think also, I was having such a beautiful dream when you were waking me up." Rose asks her, "What was it about?" Lucy says, "You know, I can't really remember. I just know it showed a field with snow and flowers. The sky had a gloomy reddish-black palette to it. For once in the past few weeks, I finally felt at ease, restful, as if everything was okay, not a care in the world. Definitely odd but acceptable." After she finishes talking, Samuel speaks up and says, "Okay, ladies, let's head down to the tavern and get some breakfast." When they get to the tavern, they are approached by 2 guards. One says to Samuel, "Well, it looks like you 3 are ready to meet Hendrick." Samuel says, "Well, we planned on getting breakfast." Before he finishes his sentence, a tall, long-haired man approaches them at the doorway. "Wait!" Lucy lets out a little shriek. "You're the wizard standing in the dead land when we approached the village." Samuel jumps to his guard and unsheathes his rifle from his shoulder. He yells at the man, "Are you the traitor? Are you the one who's been playing mind games with Lucy's head?" The 2 guards get on point and start to bum rush Samuel, but the wizard stops both in complete stillness by raising his hand and simply shifting it left. He then proceeds to speak. "We can't talk here, Samuel. This is a bad place. Hell, now the whole village has become plagued with bad things." Confused, Samuel and the 2 ladies say, "What? Where do we go?" Samuel asks, "How did you know my name?" Hendrick blatantly looks him in the eyes and says, "Brother, I know much more about you than you may even know." "Now, enough time wasting. We're running on limited minutes. Follow me." The 3 start following the wizard out into the streets of the village. After a good mile of them all hiking up the big hill in the middle of the village, they approach a massive castle. It's a beautiful-looking castle but has a weird, disturbing sadness to it. They continue to follow Hendrick to the castle, when they all come to a stop before walking across a little drawbridge. Here they are met by a massive set of golden doors, and 2 guards standing on each side of the doors. Finally, Hendrick waves his hand and the doors peel themselves open. They walk into the castle, and become surrounded by a massive room with a huge roofed ball, that is designed with stars and planets. "It looks like the universe," Lucy says. Rose speaks back to her, saying, "This place is humongous," and Samuel adds, "So this is how the rich folks live, on the backs of their workers." Hendrick comes to a stop in front of a massive fireplace, and a lady sitting in a chair. Hendrick speaks to the lady, saying, "Mistress, I brought you the little girl." The lady looks at the 3 of them as they stand next to Hendrick. The lady is absolutely gorgeous. She has luscious eyes, sleek soft hair that has a blonde and black color into it. Her face is very smooth as well. She looks as if she's in her early 20s. She finally speaks to all of them and says, "Ah, yes, the deed is to be fulfilled with no hesitation." Samuel says, "Who are you? What do you want with Lucy?" As he's speaking, the woman looks down at a little pouch on her side sitting on a small glass table. She picks the pouch up and unwraps the knot holding it together. Samuel says again, "I said, what do you want with Lucy?" In his hasty false statement, he's immediately forced from his feet into a chair, as well as his daughter. He lets out a yell. "What?" Chains tie around his wrists and legs. The same is done with Rose. Lucy cries out to Hendrick and this mysterious woman, "Please, he was only asking you guys a question. He didn't mean anything bad by it." But as she continues to speak, she is forced into a chair as well. No chains grab her wrists or feet, though, Samuel continues to struggle and yell at the duo. "You fucking bastards. What is this?" Malachi whispers a small phrase and suddenly Samuel and Rose vanish in front of Lucy's eyes. "What? Where'd they go?" she cries. The woman finishes opening the pouch and pulls out a small flute. She starts to stare at the fire and play a lullaby called a Narnian lullaby. Lucy, silenced, starts feeling happy, sad, depressed, intrigued, angry. She goes through a bunch of emotions. The room starts fading away from her vision. She's in a completely sedated state of mind and eventually the entire room fades to black. Lucy opens her eyes and is met by a creature standing in a corner, snarling and growling at her. She starts to cry and scream for help, but then suddenly she can't speak at all, as if her mouth was sewn shut or something was blocking her from speaking. She's lying in a small circle chained to the floor, which is a sacrificial blood circle that has body parts and limbs inside of it. Looking around confused, she spots a head that looks like Samuel's face, and eventually spots another one that looks like Rose's. Gasping to be heard and to scream, she sees the creature come into the light more and more, finally revealing its face in the glowing light of 4 cauldrons holding a fiery liquid around her. Snarling and smiling with evil laughter, the creature makes its way into the light. She sees its face, which looks like a baby's face mixed with some kind of demon. Suddenly, it points a long finger at the corner of the circle, and it lights up a small flame on each candle lined around the circle's ring. Lucy can see everything in the room now, including the creature's entire body and face. It looks like a deformed baby that a demon consumed the soul and flesh of. In her confusion and fear, a large gate door slams open and Hendrick walks through. Lucy makes eye contact with the wizard, still silenced, and he approaches the creature. The creature snarls at him and says, Well, it looks like you're a dependable human being, Malachi." Malachi gets on his knees and bows his head to the creature. The creature continues to speak and says, "We have everything we need, Malachi, the parents' limbs and the fools she brought with her. Now we just need you to grab the man's body from Zone B of the psych ward." Hendrick tastefully and arrogantly says, "Yes, Kling, yes, I've already accomplished that too." To Kling's surprise, the woman Lucy saw before she was put to sleep brings a skeletal, lifeless-looking corpse into the room. The corpse looks directly at Lucy as it walks into the room with them, and Lucy sees everything Aslan has done to this man mentally over the years. She gasps to herself, sobbing as all this is being done in front of her helplessly. Kling says loudly to the figure, "Lay down." Lay next to the child in the circle. With no hesitation, the figure walks towards Lucy and she continues to sob. Silenced, scared out of her mind, the figure lays down next to her and looks directly at the side of her face. She lays there and tries anything she can to not look at it, begging that this is a dream, a nightmare. "Please, let me wake up," she tells herself, but she doesn't wake up. The creature Kling tells Malachi, "Now finish the final sacrifice." Malachi stands up from the bow position he was in and walks over to the young lady. Just as he gets in front of her, Kling yells, "Stop." Malachi, startled, stops. Kling says, "Let's make this even better for Aslan. Blood spread is flowing. Let's add a little lust to it too." Confused, Malachi turns around and says, "Kling, what are you asking of me to do?" Kling says, "Take her clothing off." "But Kling, this is my family." Malachi yells in pain, "Fuck." Kling screams again, "Do as you're told, pawn." Malachi starts to take the woman's clothing off until she's completely naked. Kling says to Malachi, "Now take your clothing off." Disturbed and angry, Lucy is being forced to witness all of this sickness while this skeletal figure lays next to her, just staring at her, never blinking or looking away. Finally, both Malachi and the woman are naked. Kling approaches both of them and says, "Now walk into the circle with Lucy and that stupid fool next to her." They both walk into the circle, all of their body parts exposed to Lucy. She tries to close her eyes, but the creature Kling forces her with some kind of black magic to keep them open the entire time. Kling says, "Now get on your knees in front of Malachi." Malachi, haunted and sickened, sheds a tiny tear and looks over at Lucy. He has a weird apologetic expression in his look, as if he's saying he's sorry to the little girl. The woman sits on her knees, lightly crying, and Kling says to her, "Now suck his cock, suck his cock," present as Lan and our master, our creator, with the final sacrifice. Startled, Malachi feels his cock begin to get hard. Eventually, at its maximum growth of 9 inches solid, he feels the woman's mouth go onto his cock. She starts sucking it super slow at first, while still lightly crying. Malachi looks at Kling while its eyes are enclosed on the circle and it's chanting. Malachi closes his eyes and sees this little girl he's raised since she was a child. They met as kids in the town square, when his parents were housekeepers to the king and queen of the village. He starts crying and his tears start hitting her face as she's continuing to suck his dick. Eventually, she forces the entire thing down her throat, gags, and spits all over it until he comes in her throat and painfully pulls out, finishing all over her face. Once this is finished, the creature Kling finishes its chant and 2 tall silhouettes appear. Lucy looks at the girl as she looks up at Malachi helplessly, with spit and semen all over her face. "I love you, Malachi," the girl says. Just as Malachi goes to look at her, one of the silhouettes slashes a fiery blade through the side of her head and cuts it off, spraying blood all over Malachi's naked body. In complete shock, Malachi looks at Kling and screams, "Why? You lied to me. I did everything you asked of you, you piece of shit." The creature snarls and laughs as both silhouettes bum rush Malachi, one slashing at his stomach and the other slashing at his arm. His stomach bursts open, pouring blood, and his arm gets cut off, landing on the floor. At this point, Lucy is begging to die or wake up. The scars from everything she's just witnessed would haunt her for years if she stayed alive. Suddenly, everything around her fades away and goes dull. She sees a face start to come into the picture like a frame. It's Sinsana's face. She cries, "Sinsana, help me, please." A blast hits the room, and Kling yells, "No, no, this can't be. I'm almost finished. I failed you, Aslan." Suddenly, she opens her eyes and sees the silhouettes are gone, and Kling is a pool of flesh and bones on the floor, the disturbing baby face smashed into the ground. She looks at her arms and legs and sees the chains have been broken loose. Looking over, she sees the figure of that skeletal man lifeless and dead. She stands up and gasps to herself, "What is this hell?" Looking around the room, she sees Malachi, the woman, Rose, Samuel, and her 2 parents spread out across the circle, all of whom are now dead. She lets out a shriek and cries. Out of nowhere, she starts to hear voices, "Run, run, run." It sounds like Malachi, the woman, her parents, Samuel, and Rose. All of them are telling her to go to the wardrobe. They keep saying over and over again. She runs out the doorway and sees 2 pitch-black hallways leading left and right. The voices continuing to guide her say, "Left, go left, the wardrobe, Lucy." She starts to run left at full speed, hears sprinting behind her, and sees figures chasing her, screaming and urging her on. She keeps running as fast as she can. She runs straight through a massive set of doors, where she's finally approached by the wardrobe. She stands still, and the doors slam shut behind her. She continues to move closer to the wardrobe, and as she stands in front of it, she puts her hand on the left door. She opens the door and is presented by a lady standing inside of it. "Come with me, Lucy." The figure puts its hand out, and Lucy says, "Help me." She touches the hand of the lady. Eventually, all of her surroundings are gone, the door to the wardrobe closes, and Lucy vanishes. To be continued in Part 2: The Dark Reality of Narnia.
I dream of a place that isn't real. I love the way Yeah, putting the pill on my tongue, feeling like I am above. Grew up, not so young anymore. I'm born for what I become. Yeah. Think that I've lost my mind, cause I'm staring at the sky. All of a sudden I wanna die, stuck in the realm of nine. I don't get high, I don't numb the pain, I just feel this every day, hoping that it goes away. I dream of a place that isn't real. I love the way bills make me feel. They make me feel so numb, like I'm drowned. I just got tired from a dumb bitch. Now I'm living super selfish. I've been acting really helpless. I dream of a place that isn't real. I love the way these perks make me feel. It made me feel so good.